Bună ziua, doamnelor și domnilor! Bun venit aici live la emisiunea Outlook pe DC News. Sper că ați avut un weekend plăcut și ați așteptat o nouă dezbatere interesantă aici în emisiunea mea. O dezbatere despre o temă de viitor. Întrebarea este cât timp este o temă de viitor și dacă nu cumva ar trebui să ne preocupe acest subiect deja din zilele noastre. Și anume este vorba despre tehnologiile convergente. Un termen destul de abstract, de neînțeles, pe care îl voi discuta astăzi cu un invitat special, expert în acest domeniu. Dar ce înseamnă aceste, de fapt, științe sau tehnologii convergente? Termenul de tehnologii convergente se referă la una dintre cele mai recente și centrale evoluții, nu doar în știință, ci și în domeniul tehnologiilor avansate, evident de importanță socială decisivă. Sinergie sau fuziuni din 4 tipuri principale de tehnologii moderne. Această descoperire, spun oamenii de știință, ne va schimba radical viețile. Pentru prima dată, acest termen de tehnologii sau științe convergente, în sensul său modern, a apărut în binecunoscutul raport al US National Science Foundation în 2001, unde a fost prezentată așa numita inițiativă NBIC. Termenul de convergență NBIC a fost introdus în 2002 de Mihail Rocco, originar din România, și Bainbridge. Convergența NBIC este însă influențată reciproc, este influența reciprocă a tehnologiei informațional și cognitive. Are 2 puncte principale. 1. Unificarea diferitelor științe în cadrul unui proiect interdisciplinar la scară nanometrică, iar 2. Problema, așa zisă, îmbunătățirii umane, în ghilimele, bineînțeles, și a funcționalității umane. Deci, discutăm despre îmbunătățirea performanței umane sau a îmbunătățirii umane, deci în sensul unei ameliorări sau bioameliorări umane. Noul concept include în domeniul său de aplicare interacțiunea, deci sinergia între domenii de activitate precum nanoștiința, nanotehnologia, biotehnologia și, desigur, științele vieții, tehnologiile informației și comunicațiilor, dar și științe cognitive. Sociologul Castells a atras atenția asupra lor deja din anii 90 și a subliniat că convergența tehnologică se extinde din ce în ce mai mult la un nivel de interdependență tot mai mare dintre revoluțiile biologice și cele microelectrice. Atât din punct de vedere material, cât și, desigur, din punct de vedere metodologic. Deci, iată că la mijlocul anilor 90, Castells a remarcat că această convergență tot mai mare a tehnologiilor specifice într-un sistem extrem de integrat în care vechile traiectorii tehnologice izolate devin literalmente indistinguishable. Castells a fost primul care a prevăzut precondițiile și geneza fenomenului de convergență în societatea tehnologiei informației. Astăzi îl avem în emisiune pe domnul Danila Medvedev de la Moscova, a intrat live aici la Outlook. Danila, good morning. How are you? Welcome to Outlook. Welcome to DC News.
Hello. Thank you very much.
Thanks for joining us. I'd like to introduce you to the Romanian audience. You were born in Leningrad, now St. Petersburg. You're a Russian futurologist and politician. Specialized in the area of science and future of Russia, you serve as a member also of the Coordination Council of the Russian Transhumanist Movement. Already back into 2005, you helped found creează, the first cryonics company outside the United States, and since 2008, you worked as Chief Planning Officer and Vice President of the Science for Life Extension Foundation based in Moscow. You've spoken hundreds of times to Russian and international media on topics ranging from the future of work to a radical post-human transformation and the so-called singularity. You have authored many popular and scientific articles on transhumanism topics. You also helped to introduce actually the ideas of transhumanism and big convergence and related ideas into the Russian expert community. Welcome once more. Thanks for joining us. Danila,
thank you.
I have not mentioned all points and relevant aspects of your path, of your career. You're welcome.
Well, we're talking about the future today, so let's focus on that.
That's right. Back to 2008, you wrote about the phenomenon of the NBIC convergence, reality and expectations. Now let's stick to the expectations. What is the NBIC convergence and what will we be facing from your point of view?
Well, I think the best way to look at NBIC convergence is through the lens of system thinking. When we consider all science, and there have been projects that visualize the entire scientific field, all the millions, tens of millions of articles put in a computer model and then mapped out so that we can see where we have economics, where we have material science, where we have virology, and like anything you can think of. And NBIC says basically that all the different types of science, different levels of science, they can integrate and that this will be a mainstream direction for science. However, what happened in the past decade after big ideas were introduced was that we realized that scientists are not very good at speaking different languages. If we have a mathematician is probably not very good at chemistry. And he doesn't think chemistry has much value to add because it's all about numbers. And if you have a chemist, it's the opposite. They don't want to talk to mathematicians. And of course, the worst are the economists. They don't think anyone can anything to offer them. They think
so much compliment.
Yeah, and as a result, we haven't seen as much transdisciplinary science, as much convergence as we would have liked to. And this led to a problem that complex projects, which were envisioned 10 years ago, 20 years ago, like human brain project, a research to create an entire model of human brain simulated in a computer so that we can have an intelligent person living in a virtual simulation, or, for example, a project of nanofactory, creation of a productive facility, which is tiny, just billions of a millimeter, and which can build from individual atoms whatever we want. These type of projects, they are by their nature transdisciplinary. They rely on this convergence between computer science, nanotechnology, biology, etc. But scientists don't know how to do them, and government doesn't know how to do them. So that's why we have all these expectations, but they're not being realized. And if you look at the recent presentations and publications by Michael Rocco, I've looked at some reports they had about 5 years ago. They're basically trying to mislead us. They're still speaking about this potential, this new universe of discovery, innovation, even though the reality is different. The reality is that we suffer from COVID, we don't have enough gas and oil, we don't have enough grain, we have hunger. This doesn't look like a world of enormous human potential and big convergence.
Couldn't agree more, but what about how far away from implementing this convergence are we now? Because many people, I've moderated also in the past such debates related to NBIC, and people tend, in generally speaking, to say, well, but that's far away in future, I don't need to care now about it. How far is, for instance, the nano network communication, which would, for instance, enable cells by means of nanotechnology to communicate with each other? Is that something, let's say, rather dealing with science fiction, or are we already in an area where such a technology might be implemented?
Well, I think it's really about human intelligence and scientists' intelligence. It's not about the technology being science fiction. It's that organizing this type of projects is science fiction. Like we can have wonderful ideas, but if we look, for example, at the Human Brain Project, it was essentially scaled down because of political infighting, because of jealousy from various scientists who said, like, the founder of the project is not doing anything right, so we should just replace him and take the money away. And this is kind of what happened in the European Union 10 years ago. And there is a great documentary about this in Silico, which shows how politicized big science is. And it's the same with what you describe. In order to create machines which can be integrated with living cells, we need science of complexity. We need system science. We need projects and government projects which are organized differently. What we have today is we have essentially a market. We have a market where people compete, they write grant applications, and some of them randomly are selected. But it's impossible to do a big project because you have to break it into like 100 of different parts, and each part needs to succeed. You have to compete, and if you fail at one grant competition, you have a missing part. That's why for projects such as International Thermonuclear Reactor, ITER in France, you have a different mode. You have intergovernment agreements which are for decades in the future, and the governments agree that they will do this work, and there are no grants. It's not like if we have some like cryostat in this ITER project, and we just send out an invitation. Anyone, please bid if you want to do this. Instead, we have this systems approach. But this systems approach is reserved for a minority of projects, and there are still many problems with bureaucracy and with the fact that these projects are inflexible. Nobody knows how to do complex stuff. So I don't think it's science fiction to do the technology. I think our science is failing us, and there is no better example than climate. It's a complex problem. It needs a complex solution. We're completely failing to do it. And this is exactly where convergence would be a perfect solution, because like, what is climate? It's essentially how one small molecule of carbon dioxide affects an entire planet. It affects the biosphere, it affects human thinking, because you can't think if there are too much CO2 in the atmosphere. It affects nanotechnology, and of course you need computer models to understand and describe everything. And we have not done a very good job here.
So if I got you right, you're basically saying that the technology is the one part which might be, so is already available, but on the other side, we have politicians and we have public administration which is unable to adopt the strategy of implementing this scientific research and what might be already implemented now. Is that right?
Yes, exactly. It's one thing to take one idea from science and create a startup with one product. It's a completely different story if you need hundreds of different ideas and thousands of different pieces of technology.
Yes, but given one day public administration and politicians would adopt a strategy how to implement this NB convergence, what could we tell our audience? What would be actually the benefits? Let's say starting from healthcare to communication and also military aspects, which one shouldn't neglect. Maybe the military aspects would be the first one where politicians might have an interest to focus on, isn't it? I mean, I've seen a study by the UK Defence Ministry in cooperation with Germany about NBIC in military science. I've seen an Austrian study. There are for sure several other studies also maybe in your country. Is that of strategic relevance, or is that something far, far in future we should at the present moment not care about?
Well, I think when we speak about the military interests, you have to be cynical and you have to call it by a proper name. It's not about military, it's about military industrial interests. It's about money, and the commercial interests of the military contractors. It doesn't require winning a war. It doesn't require anything other than there being a war, at least a threat of war, so that a lot of military hardware is developed and maybe produced. And it doesn't even matter if it works in some cases, like with the F-35 American plane. So I think that the military is not interested in this fancy ideas of big convergence. They may pay lip service to it, but in general, they just need more hardware. They need bodies on the ground, and they need hundreds of billions of dollars being spent on that. And it doesn't really matter if it works. It's not the same. It's not where we were in 1945 when there was Manhattan Project and then the Soviet project to produce an atomic bomb, where having the working technology was really a matter of life and death.
What about nanorobotics? Sorry for interrupting you, Danila. What about nanorobotics? I've read an article, and it says that military weapon replications on the one hand are being transformed by these new nanorobotic applications, and that military nanotechnologies have been suggested as far more devastating weapons than any nuclear weapon on the entire planet, with the potential for application in all military locations due to their fundamentally revolutionary benefits.
You're right about the technology side, but you have to think about the process, about the governance of the process.
Okay, so it's in this two-step aspect. One is the scientific progress, and the other one is implementing a scientific progress.
Oh, yeah, I would say scientific plus engineering plus design, because it's not just about discovering something, it's about inventing something as well. But here we have specialists on the one hand who invent something, come up with ideas, and then we have the process. And the process says, if you want to have advanced weaponry developed, you go through DARPA. And if DARPA doesn't support a nanotechnology project, then it's not going to happen. And after that, you have to go through Department of Defense procurement, which is an adventure even more advanced than creating this technology in the first place. So I think we can safely say that right now there is no big pressure on scientists to develop military nanotechnology, even though the potential is there. But a much bigger potential is dealing with carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. So if I were to develop nano machines, it would be much easier to create a machine which would take CO2 from the atmosphere than to create an advanced military armament system which would move and disassemble people or tanks or something.
So you say that the ecological problems might be dealt with by means of nanotechnology. Is that right?
That's right, and I think it's a perfect solution, because fundamentally CO2 is about nano. It's about a molecule being bad for us. So we need to take that molecule, we need to take away 2 oxygen atoms, and we need to do it extremely efficiently. And the most efficient approach we have in the world is molecular nanotechnology, where we don't move tons of matter, we don't use a lot of energy. We just take one molecule and very carefully strip away 2 atoms nanomechanically, and then we have carbon, which we can use for building anything that we want, like diamonds or diamondoid machines, or even more nanotechnology, and the oxygen which goes in the atmosphere.
In the atmosphere. And what would it mean, for instance, for healthcare? How would healthcare in general improve the help of nanotechnologies? What disease could be easily dealt with in future?
It's a very interesting question, because here we really depend on individual scientists. And we have research by Robert Freitas, who has released a new book this year, Cryogenic Revival, a 1,000-page book, where he details a lot about how nanomedicine can work, and he describes many different problems which can be fixed, and he describes the engineering approaches, how they can be fixed. But the problem is no one in the world is really supporting this kind of systems medical research. No one supports development of advanced nanomedicine. So here we have this disconnect between the science fiction-y vision and the actual projects being done. And I think the limiting factor is the number of researchers of the caliber of Drexler, Freitas, Merkel, and others, because you really need this very smart people with very big heads who can fit a lot of ideas inside and create this systemic understanding. And of course, you need to support them, and that's not what's happening.
Now, we looked actually at the aspect, now briefly, of nanotechnology. What about the aspect of artificial intelligence? I've spoken in the past in other debates about the social credit system in China, and what if such a social credit system would also be implemented in other parts of the world in order to monitor, to stimulate human beings' behavior, to behave more in accordance with ecological principles, to have a more balanced behavior, to have people always trying to fit into the society in order to create, to generate these benefits. Would such a system of social credits be monitored by artificial intelligence? Who would set then the criteria and the rules? What sort of behavior should be honored and what sort of behavior should be punished? What about artificial intelligence in controlling or administering populations and also knowing their political thoughts? How would artificial intelligence influence us in future? Because it's part of this NBIC convergence concept.
It is, and it's very uncertain at this stage, because what you're talking about large-scale information systems, and in addition to huge potential there, these systems are very prone to delays and failures, and the many examples where you try to build something complicated and then it just doesn't work. And IT projects are the worst of all mega projects. So we don't have a lot of information about how successful social credit system is in China beyond the initial experiments. And there is obviously not much transparency, so we don't have any researchers with access to data, but what we do know about the Western examples with social media, with applications of artificial intelligence in law, in medicine, in social services in the United States and in Europe, what we know is that there are a lot of problems, a huge number of problems. So it's very likely that in China you have the same amount of problems. It's just that nobody is writing about them in the media. So I would say that it seems that at the moment we don't have the cognitive power to create models of the society so that we can manage them. All the great ideas of cybernetics from 1940s, 1950s, they're still true. It's still potentially possible, but I don't think we have the capability.
There was a study issued by the federal government of Germany. What if a similar system of social credits would be one day implemented in Germany? They say that it's a simple debate and that do not want to implement such a social credit system in Germany, but nevertheless, the Minister of Education had published it. Now, they say certainly the data protection would be of a very high level and that this system would be never at breach with fundamental constitutional principles of, let's say, civil and human rights. But my question is, we are aiming, given that all these technologies might be convergent and could be implemented one day, we are aiming towards what kind of citizen? To a transparent citizen, to a sort of new individuum, depersonalized, without a free will. What's the ambition? What's the aim of converging technologies? They are looking at what type of citizen? They are looking at what type of individual?
I think there is no ambition here. I don't think anyone implementing or advocating such projects actually understands the social and philosophical implications, despite there being some lip service paid to that, because NBIC, as you are aware, was extended to NBICs, so that in addition to nano, bio, info, and cogno, there is also the social aspect. But it's one thing to say social, and it's another thing completely to understand it. And what we have today in social science, in social, political, economic science, is that there are a lot of people who are occupying these bullshit jobs in academia, and they're pretending to understand something. They're writing the papers, they're attending conferences. But the truth is, they don't understand anything about society. They have nothing to add. They're just using demagogy to just create this illusion of understanding. So when you are asking a very straightforward, question: what kind of future do we envision with this social credit-like systems? Like, how do we want to shape the person? And the answer is nobody knows. Nobody has any idea. Nobody has any vision. People are just speaking about social justice or liberal values or like freedom. They're just using these words as if they are specific enough to actually mean something. But it's about values. It's not about specific result. So what I think is we are going forward blind. We don't have any vision. China doesn't have a vision. Saudi Arabia doesn't have a vision. United States, Russia, or Europe, they don't have a vision. So we're kind of at the limit of our ability to understand and envision this social change. We need something, maybe some sort of magic cognitive technology. Maybe we need artificial intelligence. Okay, that's right, so that it decides for us. But us humans flying completely blind without any instruments.
At least in the Western world, some of the people are quite scared about the so-called fourth industrial revolution. What's the relevance of this fourth industrial revolution or the Great Reset? I'm not saying that I'm sharing their feelings, but I'm taking them seriously. I'm looking at what people are scared about. What's the general impression in Russia? Are the feelings somehow similar to people in Europe about this Great Reset and also about this potential strategy of converging technologies, which obviously would change our lives?
Well, I think it's a really funny concept, and it's a great example of the kind of bullshit that you have in social commentary. This model emerged in the World Economic Forum, and initially it was based on this super optimistic vision of exponential technological growth and big convergence, faster computers, artificial intelligence, and it was completely. It was nice. It was nice story, and everyone enjoyed it. And then in 2020, COVID pandemic happens, and they need to update it because we're clearly not in that kind of story. So they just try to twist it and create this great reset as if that was a plan all along, which it wasn't. So I think it's a very naive commentary. I think they don't understand the author, Klaus Schwab. He doesn't understand the systemic forces. He just uses what is on the surface to basically create a believable story. But it's it's not deep enough. It's not true. It's not about the real world and the real complex processes that we have. It's just a story he can sell through his platform of World Economic Forum and other international organizations. The reality is we do need a new industrial or technological revolution, but it has to come from systemic understanding of what is actually possible, like what Eric Drexler designed for nanotechnology. You cannot just say that this fourth revolution and include everything there: drones, artificial intelligence, quantum computers, organ printing, nanotech, and just say all that is coming, because that's not true.
So his point of view is a rather naive, a rather superficial one, because he wants to deal with a pandemic and still present his concept he had been working on for a while. So that's not necessarily something people, for instance, in Russia are scared about.
Well, Russia is at a crossroads, and I mean, we are trying to do some communications and analysis here, but it's really interesting that we have this global issue of global warming, and a few years ago, people appeared to agree everywhere in the world that we need to reduce emissions, we need to transition from fossil fuels and get to net zero by 2050. What happens now is that everyone needs fossil fuels, apparently. Everyone needs Russian fossil fuels, which puts Russia in a position to basically go from this transition and net zero ideas and say, okay, for the next 30 years, we're going to pump the oil and the gas out and sell it abroad, and you're going to like it, you're going to use it. And that means we're not going to fight climate change. We're not going to successfully stop it or reverse it. And at the same time, global warming happens, which creates droughts and heat waves for everyone and makes the equatorial zone and Australia unbelievable. Yeah, but for Russia, it's perfect because we have this huge territory in the Arctic, which is going to become warm, and we can house hundreds of millions of people there. So that creates a very interesting situation geopolitically. And also Russia and also China have huge amounts of mineral wealth, which Europe, for example, doesn't have, because Europe has used all that during the Industrial Revolution. Russia and China have tons and millions and billions of tons of stuff. So that means that politically we need to really come up with different stories. The fourth industrial revolution is not a realistic story. And many people are starting to talk about collapse, civilizational collapse, but I mean, we need systemic understanding of what's going on. Without that, we are going to be at the mercy of demagogues like Trump, for example, and many other politicians who come to the election and then they just tell these fables and everybody believes them or kind of pretends that they believe. And then nothing like that happens at all, because Trump didn't make America great again. Like that was a lie, obviously. And the same is kind of true for all the other political systems, like the Britain with Brexit, and Russia and Romania.
Well, that's obviously their job to make promises all day long. But let's have another quick last look at NBIC. Do you see any differences, let's say, between the American and the Russian concept of NBIC? And what about the Chinese and the Indian concept of NBIC? Do they differ at a certain extent? Or could you say that, for instance, the cosmist movement in Russia has more influenced the Russian understanding of NBIC in comparison to the American, or there are no dogmatic differences?
It's hard to say, because really a big convergence is it's really a very complicated and complex idea, and I don't think there are many scientists, and Bainbridge and Rocco are clearly not. I would say, not good enough to deal with all the implications and to manage the evolution of this concept. So I think that in every country, in the US, in India, in Russia, you have a completely inadequate scientific community dealing with this. So yeah, in Russia, in theory, you have this Mikhail Kovalchuk, who is a supporter of NBIC, and he is head of some research institutions. And he's also a person from the circle of very close friends of Putin. And that means he has the potential to get resources for that, but he clearly failed when he tried last time to implement a big strategy for science in Russia. And also, if he's not smart enough, if he's not good enough, and I think he's not smart enough to actually manage the complexity of NBIC, because that means like it's hundreds of thousands of scientists, it's thousands of different research directions. You cannot just say convergence and by magic everything happens. You need to actually be able to manage this huge project, and he cannot do that. So that means in all countries, I would say even China with all their bureaucracy and planning power, but they're still not good enough to actually manage this transition. And this leads us to a very important philosophical question of scientific progress and if there is actually progress. There is a school of thought like David Deutsch and others who are saying that we humans are so smart. We have created this enlightenment, industrial revolution, technological revolutions, and we are making this exponential progress. And this is a very nice story, but it seems today in 2022 that it's actually not the real story. The real story is that we were kind of somewhat good to exploit the energy, the resources that we found. And now that the energy is running out, we're not good enough. We're like children who found some stuff that their dad had, like a gun or cigarettes or alcohol, the keys to the house and to the car. And then they just got drunk and they crashed their car and they shot somebody. And it's because they're children, they're stupid. And that's what we have today with NBIC.
Well, it's somehow very good to hear the way you are reasoning, actually, that there are very few chances at all that anti-convergence might be implemented in the near future because the system is not ready for it yet. And that there are no strategies, so we don't need necessarily to be afraid of it, not of the fourth industrial revolution, nor of a great reset, because the system had not adopted a proper strategy of implementing this convergence, which is a very comforting answer. I really like that a lot. Huh? But
I would have to say that there is a path that goes through intelligence enhancement and intelligence augmentation, which includes systems thinking and other tools. And I'm trying to go that way. I'm trying to lead people on that direction. And if we are successful enough, then we become smart enough to actually tackle complexity and then make big happen and make other stuff happen. But we have to become smarter first. And it's a very real and specific goal. We have to graduate.
So we should not give the brains out of our hands and to expect that artificial intelligence would solve all our problems on its own. It still needs our contribution in order to tackle down with the things which are creating problems in the world, isn't it?
It appears this way, yeah.
Danila, thank you very much for joining us here at DC News in Bucharest, here in my talk show Outlook. I enjoyed it very much like I enjoyed our first dialogue last year, and hope to see you soon, and wishing you a nice, good, prosperous week to Moscow, and all the best.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye, Danila.